My name's Trudy Juriansz from Sri Lanka. I live in the hill country, the mountains of Sri Lanka. I'm a representative of Genoa, but I'm also here as part of the International Analog Forestry Network. So we've been hearing about a lot of the communities and beautiful work that's been happening. I'm also here kind of as a representative of the forests and the species and the voiceless of our communities, the forest communities. I want to start with a quote from the Buddha, where the Buddha talked about the forest thousands of years ago as being this amazing organism, self-organizing organism of unlimited kindness and benevolence that gives so much to us without asking from us anything in return. And it even offers shelter to the axeman that fells it. So the Buddha was thinking about the forest way back. So what is a forest? When we think of a forest, what do we think about? We think about trees. But the forest is more than that. The forest is one of the most ancient organisms on our planet. It dates back to the Devonian period, over 300 million years ago. It has literally changed the evolution of our planet by changing the atmosphere and allowing all of us to breathe and live. It is the most mature terrestrial ecosystem on the Earth, and it is a system that is constantly changing and moving across the landscapes over time. It's a dynamic process. So a forest is characterized by many things, but two of the main things is its biodiversity and biomass. And it's interesting because when we think of a forest, we think trees, but the trees account for only 1% of the forest's biodiversity. 1%. So where is the other 99%? The other 99% is in the vines and the ground cover and the epiphytes, the other species that live in the forest. That's the other 99. And the biomass, it's interesting that 1% of the biodiversity of the trees, 80% of the biomass is in the trees, the leaves of the trees that give life to all of us. Oops, sorry. So we all know some of the ecosystem services that forests give, the main ones of food and water, shelter. The forest gives other free services of regulating our climate. So when we're talking about climate change, this is something that we really need to address. We have to bring this into the conversation, what forests can do. It also is a nutrient cycling system. It creates soil, and it's also a very big part of our spirituality and our connection to other beings on this earth. So just going back to a little bit to the biomass, the leaves of the trees, if we look at one tree in a year acts like 10 air conditioning units. That's the cooling effect of the trees. It absorbs over 750 gallons of water, storm water, cleansing and cleaning, and filters 60 pounds of pollutants in the air. And the photosynthetic biomass, which is the leaves of the trees, this is the only production system on our Earth that actually regulates and maintains the global oxygen cycle. So when we look at cities around the world, there are so many, the cases of respiratory disease is increasing and increasing. So as in the cities, as oxygen levels go down, you see the increase in this respiratory disease more radically. And yesterday I went to a session by John Croft, and he talked about the Amazon forest and why it's so important in our oxygen cycle. It's the ecosystem that produces 20% of the air that we breathe. This is the importance of this support system. In Sri Lanka, we have Sri Lanka was covered in primary forest many thousands of years ago. During the colonization period, we saw a huge destruction of these primary forests, the lungs of the country, the systems that helped us to breathe. We see monocultures of eucalyptus and pinus in the mountains. We see tea plantations. And tea plantations in Sri Lanka is one of the most destructive industries, actually, because of the chemical input that's used in the soil and the foliar spray that's used in the leaves of these bushes. So the soil, the living organism, the skin of the earth is completely dead. So in analog forestry, the work that we do is we look at how we can transform these degraded landscapes into thriving ecosystems again. So in Sri Lanka, the government also sees forests more like a tree-dominated ecosystem and a monoculture, one species. They don't look at the diversity that the forest is and what it has to give to us. So the other issue we have in Sri Lanka and the response of analog forestry is this monoculture and deforestation, but also our view of oil. And the way that we see it is there's two main views of oil in the world, and in Sri Lanka the official communicate is that no oil means no development. And we compare that to Amazonian tribe in Ecuador that has a lot of oil deposits under its land that says oil represents the spirits of the dead. Ask it for power and you sacrifice your children. You know? So we have to really look at this. So in Sri Lanka in 1981, there came a response to this destruction, to this monoculture, and it was called analog forestry. And it seems to me like, 30 years ago, around the same time, so many other movements started happening around the world. And in Sri Lanka, this was our response. So a systems ecologist by the name of Dr. Ranil Senanaika, with his community, started developing this concept. Basically got a degraded land and started not just planting trees, but started looking at the relationships between the other species, the community of beings. So this is a photo of our land here that I'm a guardian of on the right, which is an example of the restoration in 30 years, what's possible. And this is the modern day agriculture across the river. So what is an analog? Lizzie was asking that. So an analog means similar to. So if we look at analog forestry, we look at this as an example. You have the wings of a butterfly and the wings of a bat. Both are similar in form and function. They perform the same form and function, but they come from two different evolutionary origins. And so it's kind of like about patterns, you know. So we can also look at this. This is an example of an analog as well. You have this bridge that is very strong and resilient, but the way that it's constructed is very similar to the bones of, I think this is an eagle. I can't remember where I got this from. But it allows this flexibility, allows it to move and take the weight and be resilient. We see this also in the veins of the human body, which is similar to the veins of a leaf, which is similar to the veins of the earth, the tributaries that go out into a delta. So in analog forest, we can see the top two pictures are pictures of a primary forest or a native forest, and the bottom two are pictures of analog forests in Sri Lanka. So we're copying the structure and the function of the forest, but we're not necessarily, when we're working with degraded land, we're not necessarily inputting the same species, but trying to find species that will also give us benefit, that will give us an income or provide for our communities. So it's about intention as well. Analog forestry also came from the inspiration of the traditional home gardens in Sri Lanka, which has been in our country for hundreds of years. This idea of creating forest gardens around our homes and our villages. So we have a set of tools, we have a set of principles and ethics that we follow as well. I'm from a permaculture background, so when I found analog forestry, I was like, it's so complementary, these tools. We observe the native or mature forest patch in our area. We record certain indicators of structure and species function and the overall system health. We mimic the ecological succession in our design, and we create with intention, with purpose. And we try to be as creative as possible. So the land that I'm a caretaker of looked like this 30 years ago. And now it's this thriving ecosystem. So when I walked into this place, I just realized, oh my God, as humans, we are capable of really creating immense beauty. We can really take degraded land, we can work with our communities, our villages, and restore in a short period of time. So what's happened in our forest is that this maturity has come in a space of 30 years, that if we allowed nature's cycles to happen, it would have taken a lot longer. It would have taken about 200 years to reach that level of climax. So we've been able to bring back diversity in all forms. And at the heart of our restoration tool is it's about ecosystem restoration. So forest not only for humans, but for other species, other energies, other spirits. And I can, if anyone's interested, I can show this to you in a bit more detail. But the other thing, when we're working with communities in Sri Lanka, it's about, if we want to restore land, we have to work with communities that are already existing. How can we reward them for doing this type of farming, for this type of work? So this is an example of forest garden tea. So this is a response to the monoculture. So we can grow tea in the canopy of the forest. And we can add value to the products that we get from the forest in the marketplace. So in Sri Lanka, we've also created a certification called FGP, or Forest Garden Products. And this is a third-party certification, but we also have a local certification that wouldn't cost local farmers anything. So it's an incentive for farmers to transition. But if we want farmers in these rural areas to transition and create products that we can sell in the market, there needs to be a demand for forest garden products. And the way that we see forest garden products is that it's a beyond organics, because it's not just planting organic monoculture, it's about restoring the ecosystem at the same time. So a couple of things before I finish this, sorry, is this idea of using analog forestry to create biological corridors. So most of our forests around the world are in fragmented patches that remain in isolation. So the flow of energy, of genes, of species is really inhibited. They cannot flow freely between each other. So how can we use analog forestry to connect these patches of forest, really with that intention to bring back that biodiversity? So our network is in many countries around the world. Actually, we're in Sri Lanka and Cameroon, but mostly in Latin America. And our community in Costa Rica are trying to form the first biological corridor that connects ocean to ocean, from the Pacific to the Caribbean Ocean. And so communities there are really working together, and we only have 7 kilometers left to reforest. And we're looking at how we can use analog forestry to do that. So my question, what I was thinking about ecovillages and communities is, can ecovillages help to connect fragmented forest patches that enable this free flow of genes, energy, and species and energy? And I feel by using analog forestry, permaculture, ecovillage design, we will be able to create these ecological corridors and restore the earth piece by piece, really restoring the planet's life support system. And I'll leave you with one quote that has been an inspiration for me for a long time, a quote from grandmother Agnes from the Native American tribe in North America. She speaks for the voiceless. I am a voice for the voiceless. We are all speaking to an unseen world, speaking for our Mother Earth, trying to stop our spiritual blindness. We speak for the animal kingdom, for those in the waters, for the 4-leggeds and the 1-leggeds and the creepy crawlies. And I pray our Creator hears us. The creatures have a right to be. Thank you.
Wow.